This video provides an introduction to Supplemental Instruction, or SI, at MiraCosta College. We're going to be discussing why academic support is so important for our students and what makes an SI program and individual SI sessions so successful at supporting our students in their learning. But let's start with a simple question. Why SI? What's the goal of an SI program? Well, simply stated, it's to facilitate learning by our students. And in so doing, we hope to improve graduation and retention rates. Now, why is that needed? Why is that so important? Well, it turns out that in general, program completion and college graduation rates are still pretty poor across the country. If we look on average at the percentage of students who complete their college program, either at their first institution or a subsequent institution, it turns out that only about 57% of students graduate. Fully 42.9% of students drop out somewhere along the way and never finish their program. And even though these data that are provided here are pretty old, the trends still hold true even to today. And if we break it down by individual states across the country and even look at individual student demographic groups, we can see that some of those groups have much, much lower completion rates than that. Here we're looking at six-year graduation rates across the country. So that's what percentage of students actually complete their college program within a six-year timeline. And you can see that, there are some states that perform very poorly indeed. The lighter yellow is the worst success rate, and then the darker red is at the better end of the scale. But even that, if we look at California, 61.5 to 69.1 is not a great completion rate overall. And you might be wondering, how does MiraCosta College compare? Well, if we look at MiraCosta's data, we see that it's not great. So here we're looking at the program completion rates by MiraCosta College students since 2004. And by program completion, what we mean is that a student actually obtained a degree at MiraCosta or earned a certificate or successfully transferred to their four-year institution. And what you can see is that overall our student population has been hovering at around 50% successful program completion since 2004. Those trends are pretty steady. And if we break it out by students who are prepared for college level work versus those who come in to MiraCosta having to take courses that are below college level, we can see that students come in at college level have a success rate for program completion at about 70%. Those that have to take some coursework that prepares them for college level work are not having as much success. So those are 40% for program completion. So this is a big problem, right? This needs to be solved. And how has it been traditionally addressed? If we look at the history of academic support, it's been focused on, trying to figure out who are the highest risk students that need help, who's most likely to drop out or not complete their program. How do you identify them? How do you find these students? Where are they located on campus? And the traditional methods that have been used to try and identify those students that are most at risk for not succeeding are things like, the students who have the lowest standardized test scores, SAT or ACT scores, looking at rank in your high school class, course performance, so a student who didn't successfully complete a course previously might be targeted for some sort of intervention when they take the course subsequently, doing diagnostic testing or in-house screening, incoming assessment tests, things like that, and then student self-referral, relying on the student to self-identify as being at risk for not completing and helping them when they show up at the door. And so what sorts of interventions have been used traditionally to target those high-risk students and try to support them in their learning? Well, there's been individual tutoring, the traditional model where the student comes to a tutor with questions or having trouble with particular course content, and the tutor then tries to answer those specific questions or address those struggles. Encouraging the students to take study skill courses that help them improve their academic skills that are going to help them succeed across all of their coursework. Having students take courses that will better prepare them for college level work, so remedial subject courses, and then encouraging them to engage in student success workshops and counseling sessions that are aimed at improving their success. And these are all helpful to some extent, but they also have some problems that are associated with them that make them less than ideal. So one of the problems is, it's expensive to provide a lot of these students, and you don't get as much benefit from the amount of money that's being spent as you potentially could. And the other issue is that it really promotes a remedial image that is detrimental to students' self-worth, and may actually make them less likely to reach out and seek support services. Another issue is that you're not always best able to identify high-risk students based on those parameters. You might have a student who did, great in high school, and then once they get to college level, find that they don't have the skills that they need to succeed in this environment. And then for some of these programs, once the student has, attended the workshop or, the counseling session, it's really difficult to evaluate the effectiveness of that intervention and see what happens with that student going forward. It also presumes that you have time to identify and remediate these students, before they fall off their ed plan track. And so these are some of the challenges that are associated with traditional approaches. Now, supplemental instruction is different. It takes a different approach to the problem. Rather than trying to focus on students that are struggling, what SI does is it focuses on tough courses and seeks to provide assistance to all students that are enrolled in those tough courses. So there's no sort of remedial stigma that's attached to engaging with SI, because it's really designed to help all students. So what is supplemental instruction? As a formal approach to academic support, supplemental instruction began at the University of Missouri in Kansas City in 1973. It was actually a program that was created by a graduate student in the School of Education by the name of Deanna Martin. And initially the program was developed to support minority students who weren't having as successful outcomes in the health sciences as they might have. And since 1973, the program has just grown by leaps and bounds and has been adopted by 4-year and 2-year colleges across the nation, and indeed has actually become a worldwide intervention program. So faculty and staff from over 3,500 institutions have been trained in how to run an SI program, and over 30 countries have SI programs that are currently running. So each semester we have, upwards of 750,000, three-quarters of a million students participating in SI at 1,500 plus institutions worldwide. It's been demonstrated to be an effective approach, and clearly this many institutions would not be spending all this money if it didn't work. So let's talk a little bit more about supplemental instruction, what it is and how it works. So supplemental instruction, just in a nutshell, is organized group study time that's facilitated by a peer or near peer. Right? So these are students that are getting together and working on course content in an active fashion, and the supplemental instruction leader is really just there to facilitate that time that they're spending together and to keep the group on track and focused on their task and make sure that their time is effective and efficient. Now, to understand how and why supplemental instruction works so well, it's useful to compare the learning-centered approach used in SI with the instruction-centered approach that's traditionally used in the classroom. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's talk about the instruction-centered approach first. In the instructional paradigm, the learning is really instructor-centered. Right? The instructor is delivering the content or information in some fashion, and the students are sort of passively receiving it and storing it, and then, it's delivered in this very passive fashion. And in the other thing to recognize about this is that the learning is sort of linear and accumulates over time. So, you are taught A, and then you are taught B, and then you are taught C, right? You have this sort of linear progression of content delivery, and students are expected to learn it in that order, and at the end of some specified amount of time, that set of knowledge has been successfully delivered, right? And hopefully has been stored in some fashion in the student's brain. So that's a very instruction-centered approach. But there's another approach, there's a different approach that focuses more on the learning aspect, right? That looks at it from the perspective of the student learner themselves. And this is the learning paradigm. Right? So if we think about this from the perspective of the student doing the learning paradigm is student-centered. The students are actively a part of the learning process. They're actively engaged with the process of discovery, the process of knowledge acquisition. It's an active approach. It's messy. It's very often non-linear. Students will learn concept A and concept D before they learn concept B or C, and hopefully at the end of the learning process, they're able to draw the connections and appropriately connect all of those concepts together that they've been struggling with, right? So it's a messy and, even uncomfortable process for students because they're more used to the instruction-centered paradigm. They're really responsible for constructing their own knowledge in this very actively engaged way. So it can be uncomfortable for them at first until they get used to it and see the benefit for taking this approach to making all these necessary connections and understanding fully what the course content is and being able to apply it once they've constructed that knowledge. And that's really the goal, right? To construct this knowledge, to truly allow our students to be educated, as the quote says, by going beyond isolated facts, putting learning in a larger context, and above all, discovering the connectedness of things, being able to connect concepts and have an overarching understanding so that they're able to apply that course content, which is really the most important piece of the puzzle, and the piece of the puzzle that students often struggle with the most. So in this process of facilitating and enabling students and learners to discover these connections and to formulate this knowledge on their own, what's the role of the SI leader? Well, the SI leader is really just there to help students put these things together, to help the students discover those connections, right? The SI session that the SI leader is facilitating revolves around student-student interaction, cooperative learning, right? If you've ever participated in a focused and effective group study session, you know how powerful it can be and how effective for learning this method is, this group study method is. And this is extensively supported by educational research. Students who study in groups learn 2.5 times more than those who study alone. That's a big if those study groups stay on task, right? And that's the big challenge, making sure that the study group stays on task and focused on what they're trying to accomplish. So one of the main roles of the SI leader is to facilitate the study session so that students do stay focused. So how does SI work? Well, the components of SI basically are student-facilitated, so these are the SI leaders, student-facilitated review sessions. You're going over course material that's already been delivered in the class, and you're facilitating that interaction and cooperative learning strategy by the students in the class themselves, right? And again, SI is designed not to target specific students that might be struggling, but rather to target courses that are traditionally more difficult for students to successfully complete, and really welcomes all enrolled students, those that are doing well, those that are doing not so well, students that are struggling, students that are really excelling in the material. All students are encouraged to participate in SI, and all students, it's important to note, derive a benefit from participating in supplemental instruction, not just the struggling students. Everyone benefits from that participation. And SI assumes and ensures that participation by the students is voluntary, so there's no credit or extra credit component, ideally associated with attendance, which can sort of skew the motivation for students to attend. We really want students to attend because they value that time and they value that approach to complementing impacting their learning. And so that should be voluntary, and it should be anonymous, so there's no bias that's introduced on the part of the instructor as to whether students are participating in SI sessions or not, because obviously there are lots of reasons why students might not be able to attend SI sessions. They may have work conflicts, they may have family responsibilities, so even though we do know that it's a valuable opportunity, it's one that not all students are able to take advantage of, and so we want to recognize that and not penalize anyone who can't come. So those are basically some of the components, foundational principles of how SI works. So in terms of the facilitators, they're trained. They're trained to conduct efficient and effective active learning group study sessions and have the full support of the faculty that are teaching those courses that they're providing SI for. The interaction between the SI leader and the faculty instructor that's teaching that class is such an important component of the SI program. And in the SI sessions themselves, students are engaging with the content, and so they're increasing their content mastery, their comprehension, their knowledge base, but they're also at the same time developing important study skills and strategies that are helping them integrate and understand that course content, right? And so those two things are integrated in the SI session. It's not just about the content, it's not just about study skills, but it's really about using effective study skills in the context of that particular course to best master that course content. And then if you're interested in education and education research, supplemental instruction is a really rich area for pursuing those research interests. And there are a lot of people that are doing so. So the SI leaders themselves ideally begin their SI sessions the very first week of classes, right? So SI leaders are going to be attending class alongside the students, and in so doing they effectively act as model students themselves. Students see them taking notes, they see them showing up on time, and so they're model students. And, in attending the class with the students, they can really refresh their own content mastery and identify those particular concepts in the class that students are going to find most difficult, right? And that helps them identify the topics for the SI sessions that they particularly want to devote time to and focus on. So outside of those lecture class sessions, the SI leader is going to provide regularly scheduled sessions outside of class, so 2 sessions per week, and is going to organize that SI session and the study strategies that are used in that session to ensure that the students that are attending are getting that conceptual understanding and really solidifying their mastery of the course content. Now, supplemental instructors, leaders are not doing this on their own. Obviously, they are receiving extensive support from their faculty mentors and from the SI staff themselves. So, as an SI leader, what's your goal for your SI sessions? What are you trying to accomplish? Well, what you're trying to do is help the students discover the connections between and within concepts themselves. Those aha moments where the students really get, the connection. That you're trying to facilitate that, right? You can't really deliver that. The students have to come to that eureka moment themselves, but that's what you're trying to facilitate. And the way that you're going to approach that is by encouraging students to work together, using each other as important resources. A lot of times students don't really view the other students in the class as being equally important to their success and their learning as the instructor of the course, but they absolutely are. Students will often understand fragments of the content and different fragments of the content, and only by engaging with one another and asking and answering each other's questions can they sort of fill in the gaps that they might have that some other student in the class really has already mastered. Right? And so the SI leader is going to develop strategies, learning strategies, and we're going to talk about these in the training, that facilitate active learning, so active processing of conceptual material as opposed to that more passive sort of soaking up the information as it flows over you in a traditional lecture setting. So SI leaders in organizing and facilitating these active learning sessions, what they're really doing is encouraging students to take responsibility for their own learning rather than being passive participants, being active participants in their own learning, and thereby breaking the so-called dependency cycle. So what is the dependency cycle? Well, in this sort of dependency cycle, the instructor, the teaching assistant, the tutor, whatever, is delivering the content to the students, right? And that could be traditional lecture, it could be by an assigned reading or some other assignment, but the content is delivered from instructor to student, and the students are sort of passively receiving that information. So this is the traditional lecture, that so-called sage on the stage model of instruction, where you have one person up there sort of just spewing the information out, and the students are hopefully soaking it up, right? But as we all know, that doesn't often happen efficiently or effectively. So what happens if the students don't get it, if they don't understand it right away, right? If the professor asks a question and the students don't immediately respond, what happens then? Well, typically what happens then is that the professor tells them again, right? Gets that silence in response to a question, says, oh, they clearly didn't understand. Well, let me just tell you again what I just said in a different way. And hopefully it's going to sink in that time, right? So I just told you again, do you get it now? I'm going to ask you a question. And what if they don't get it the second time? Well, now I'm going to tell you again. I'm going to tell you more slowly. And hopefully that third time you're going to get it. It's all extremely passive on the part of the student. And it has the unintended consequence of producing students who are extremely passive and don't take an active role in their learning. So they're used to being silent in class. They're used to passively trying to absorb information. And if they have difficulty with comprehending that information, these are students that tend to get frustrated and give up. But if you take a different approach and you break that dependency cycle and you actually empower students to actively engage with their own learning, then true learning can happen, right? So how do you do that? How do you break the dependency cycle? Well, you may still have to tell them the information, right? We're not just going to, let students run wild and, hopefully they eventually somehow build all of the concepts that they need for Calc 2. No, that's not what's going to happen, right? There's still going to be instruction. So there's still a professor for the course who's going to deliver instructional material to them. You may still have a traditional lecture class where the instructor's delivering that content. But what happens next is key, because what you do next is you get those students, once they've got that information, to talk to each other, right? And so you have students that are talking to one another and fully engaging with that content and cooperating with one another to build their knowledge base and their understanding. Right? And you can see the role of the SI leader is sort of off to the side, and that's by design. You're really just facilitating their interaction with one another, not so much their interaction with you, but their interaction with one another. So through various active learning strategies, the students themselves become the teacher. And the role of the SI leader is just to help them do that, to facilitate those important interactions, and then finally to confirm that that's been effective, right? And so now you're going to have some sort of an activity that is confirming that learning has actually occurred, right? That the interaction between the students has been effective. And you're going to do that by engaging with the students and probing their understanding, right? At the end of the SI session, that's the whole goal, is to probe how effective that active learning has been and identify any misunderstandings that may still be present. And so by taking this approach, you break the dependency cycle. You make students responsible for their own learning. They're empowered not only in that SI session and in that specific course, but also in their future classes, right? Because these are skills that they take with them when they successfully complete that one course. They don't lose that. So how does SI work to promote active learning? Let's talk a little bit more specifically about what happens in the SI sessions themselves. So the students, as we said, are going to be actively engaged and constructing their knowledge. But how are they going to do that? Well, basically, through the learning activities that are planned and organized by the SI leader, the students are encouraged to interact with one another. By design, to complete the activity, the students have to talk to one another. So there's a social element to it. Students are encouraged to interact with one another. And in so doing, what they're doing is they're exploring the information. They're explaining to one another their understanding. They're hearing another student's understanding of the same content, right? They're filling in the gaps. They're filling in the holes. And then ultimately applying problem-solving strategies and approaches that allow them to integrate their understanding and fully solidify that mastery. So ideally, in an SI session, all that we're seeing is cooperative learning. The students are relying on one another. Each student is contributing. There are no passive participants. Nobody's just sitting back taking notes on what everybody else is saying. They're all working together to make decisions and come to agreement about the course content that they may be struggling with. And somehow, pulling in resources to resolve their conflict, consulting their notes, consulting their textbook, to figure out who's right when there's some sort of a conflict over some aspect of the course material. And the group itself in cooperative learning should be reflecting on their own efficiency and ways to improve, and that includes the SI leader themselves, right? Because the SI leaders should be continually reflecting on the effectiveness of the SI sessions and thinking about ways to improve the efficacy, right? And so if we think about inside the SI session, what's going on is we have student-to-student processing of the material. It's not the SI leader that's, providing the illumination to the students. It's the students themselves that are teaching one another and cooperating with one another to assist each other in learning that content. The role of the leader is to plan the most effective active learning activities that are going to promote that processing to take place, right? And then to facilitate the SI session and organize the time to keep the students on track. Remember, a group study session only is effective as long as students stay focused on the task at hand, and that's really the role of the SI leader during the SI session itself. So what is an SI session not? Well, it's not a tutoring session. Right? The SI leader is not coming to the SI session and saying, what do you guys have questions on? All right, well, maybe they're saying that at the end, if there's time, but the SI leader is coming to the session already having considered very carefully what content is going to be focused on in the SI session, has already planned out effective learning activities that they're going to be engaging the students with during the SI session. The students are engaging in those activities and developing and constructing their learning as a result of that engagement. So there's no re-lecturing of the material, right? The lecturing happens with the content expert, which is the instructor of the course. What happens in the SI session is group study, facilitated by the SI leader, right? So no tutoring, no re-lecturing. And so if we think about the most successful SI programs and the components that make them so successful, there are elements that should be present and that are going to be present in the program developed by MiraCosta College. And as we said previously, number one is faculty support. The instructor of the course has to fully support SI as a paradigm for academic support. And all of our faculty that participate with our SI program absolutely do support and recognize how how effective SI is to support student learning. The leaders attend class with the student. They have to attend class with the student in order to understand, where the class is in terms of where they are in the content, and to help them, reaffirm their own mastery of the content, and to identify those most difficult concepts that they're going to be focusing on in their SI sessions. SI leaders undergo training that includes model strategies for them to use, and includes the element of participating in simulated SI sessions. So being able to practice with these strategies before you're out there in your SI session on your own. So that ongoing training that occurs not just at the beginning of the semester, but is actually ongoing throughout the semester as well. And that's tightly linked to supervision and feedback that the SI leader is getting from an SI supervisor on an ongoing basis as well, right? Constructive feedback to encourage SI leaders to improve their SI sessions over time, right? Regularly scheduled SI sessions are an extremely important component of the process. Students have to know exactly when those SI sessions will be, and have to have the confidence that if they show up for that SI session, the leader's going to be there and is going to have a well-planned SI session that's ready to go when they walk in through the door. And those SI sessions, in being well planned, should be incorporating strategies that are solidifying course content mastery, but also incorporating those learning strategies, those study skills, to help the students master that content on their own, right? And then finally, an extremely important component of a successful SI program is ongoing data collection and evaluation. Right? We don't just want to be getting feedback on how individual SI leaders are doing. We want to be getting feedback on how the SI program as a whole is functioning. And the only way that we can do that is by collecting the data. And what we want to be looking at is, how do students who participate in supplemental instruction at MiraCosta compare with those students who don't? We want to be able to measure and evaluate the success of the program so that we can make changes as needed to improve it on an ongoing basis. We want to continually be improving the program. What about the leaders? What makes an SI leader successful as an SI leader? Well, number one, they have to attend class. All right, so we already talked about how important it is for them to be in class as a model student, really engaging with that content alongside the students in the class, identifying those difficult topics on a weekly basis so that they're well prepared to address that content in their own SI session. They should be holding those regularly scheduled sessions, right? There should be a dependable attendance at those. So if the session is scheduled, the student should be fully confident that the SI leader is going to be there when they should be there. And they should be looking at activities to plan for their SI sessions that are based on the most difficult content. And sometimes that most difficult content is not necessarily the most important content in the class, but it may be content that students always struggle with, right? And so that's what you really want to be planning those collaborative activities to focus on, is the most difficult content that your experience as a previous student in the course has already occurred to you is the hardest thing to master. And so you want to plan those collaborative activities to address that most difficult content. Successful SI leaders encourage students to build their knowledge base, build their learning on their own. Those students using the cooperative learning approach are going to be helping one another succeed in the course and master that course material. And then finally, are helping students understand how to approach their discipline, right? You are experienced as an SI leader in that discipline. How you approach mastering content in biology is a little bit different from how you approach mastering the content in chemistry, or how you would approach mastering the content in physics or in math. There are different skill sets that need to be brought into play And you, as an experienced SI leader who's already been through the course, you have that experience under your belt that you can help students follow in your footsteps and understand how best to approach their discipline and what skills they can use to best succeed. Right? So the most important thing to recognize about SI is that when it's done well, it works. Students who attend SI have a lower rate of D, F, or course withdrawals as compared to students who don't attend SI. This is validated by extensive research by the U.S. Department of Education. So this is an effective student support strategy. And in addition to that, these are skills that the students take away with them. So the students who participate in SI learn skills and strategies to support continued academic success in all of their other classes and really in any learning environment or context that they might encounter on a lifelong basis. Now, some of you might relish the idea of taking on this kind of challenge. You might be thinking with anticipation, how great it's going to be to be an SI leader, and you've got all these plans swirling around in your head, and others might be a bit more apprehensive, not quite sure how they're going to be filling the shoes of a facilitator in a way that maybe they haven't done before. So the thing to recognize here is that you are not alone as an SI leader. You have your SI supervisor and your faculty mentor that are going to be providing constant support for you. And in addition, you're going to have the support of that faculty member who's teaching the course that you are providing SI for. So the SI program staff and faculty are always willing to offer advice and answer any questions that you may have, help address anything that comes up over the course of the semester as you're doing your SI. And the other important thing to note is that you are surrounded by other SI leaders who are themselves important sources of support and information that you're going to be meeting with on a continual basis throughout the semester. So there are going to be ongoing SI leader meetings where you're going to be able to share challenges and effective strategies with one another and provide that support. So don't feel like this is something that you're going to be taking on your own. This is something that you're going to be taking on with a lot of training and continual support, providing a foundation for you to succeed as an SI leader. So we've discussed how students benefit from SI in their courses. How about the SI leader themselves? Do they get anything out of serving as an SI leader? Well, sure they do. There are lots of benefits from being an SI leader. So you're going to gain leadership skills. Obviously, you're going to be the one leading the sessions. You're going to be planning the SI sessions. You're going to be evaluating and reflecting on those sessions to determine how effective they were, make changes for the next session, right? Those are all leadership skills that you're developing. Learning how to manage a classroom made up of a diverse student population. That's an important skill that you're going to take away and that you can apply to really any context in your education that follows or in your career. Those are skills that you never lose. You're going to have a much better understanding and mastery of the course content. And so for those of you that are going on to graduate school or to medical school or dental school, or whatever your plan is, it really reinforces that content mastery, which is so important for taking your upper division coursework and for those GREs and for your MCAT and all of those admissions tests that you may have coming up. The other thing to realize is that in working so closely with a faculty member, it provides an opportunity for you to have a more personal relationship with faculty than you might otherwise have as a student in the course. And so in thinking about asking for recommendation letters for grad school applications or transfer applications, you'll be able to call on those faculty to write better, more personalized, richer recommendations for those programs. And the fact that you have served as a supplemental instruction leader is, as they say, highly resumeable. People who are looking over your applications are going to view that in a very positive light, and it's going to provide you with more opportunities for education and your career as you leave MiraCosta. As an SI leader, you are part of higher ed. You're an educator. You're not serving in the traditional role of an instructor per se, where you're, delivering content in that way, but you absolutely are serving as an educator for our students and contributing to the education of our citizenry as a whole as a result. And that's a really important thing to keep in mind. Education is a powerful tool for advancement, and as an educator you are contributing to that in a positive way. Many students come into college having this very fixed mindset about what they do well and what they don't do well, and one of the most important things that you as an SI leader will hopefully be educating students about is that with enough resources and time and effort and positive support, they can accomplish things and they can improve on skills that they previously might have thought that they couldn't, right? And teaching them that they are able to grow and they are able to improve over time if they put the effort in and if they have the appropriate support is a really powerful lesson that they will take with them. Right? You will actually be empowering these students to become lifelong learners. And your influence is going to extend far beyond this semester of SI.